The Candyman, a tragic figure born from unspeakable violence and racial injustice, has haunted the realms of horror cinema since his debut in 1992. With his hook-handed visage and bee-infested body, Candyman has left an indelible mark on the genre, both metaphorically and literally, through a trail of blood and bodies. This analysis will delve into the Candyman's gruesome legacy, exploring his victims across the franchise and attempting to quantify the true extent of his deadly influence. Our story begins not with the spectral Candyman, but with the man he once was, Daniel Robitin. Born in the late 19th century as the son of a slave, Daniel became a talented artist. His fatal mistake was falling in love with and impregnating a white woman, the daughter of a wealthy landowner. For this transgression, Daniel was brutally murdered by a lynch mob. They cut off his right hand and replaced it with a hook, smeared his body with honey to attract bees that stung him to death, and burned his corpse, scattering the ashes over what would become the infamous Cabrini Green housing projects in Chicago. This act of horrific violence birthed the legend of the Candyman, a vengeful spirit who could be summoned by saying his name 5 times in front of a mirror. While Daniel Robitaille's death marks the beginning of Candyman's existence, it's important to note that his own murder is not counted in the body count. However, the lynching party responsible for his death could be considered his first victims in a karmic sense, as their actions led to the creation of a far deadlier entity than they could have imagined. In the original, Candyman, 1992, were introduced to Helen Lyle, a graduate student researching urban legends. As Helen delves deeper into the Candyman myth, the body count begins to rise. The first on-screen deaths attributed to Candyman are Ruthie Jean and her dog, found brutally murdered in their Cabrini Green apartment. This is followed by the death of Bernadette Walsh, Helen's friend and colleague, whose body is discovered in Helen's apartment. The most shocking and gruesome scene in the film involves the murder of an entire bathroom full of people at Helen's psychiatric hospital. While the exact number isn't specified, we can estimate at least 5 to 7 victims in this massacre. Candyman also claims the life of Dr. Berg, Helen's psychiatrist, and is responsible for the death of baby Anthony, whom he abducts. By the end of the first film, Helen herself becomes a victim of Candyman, albeit in a complex way. She dies saving the baby from a bonfire, but her death transforms her into a new urban legend, mirroring Candyman's own tragic origin. While not a direct kill by Candyman, her death is a result of his actions and influence. The confirmed body count for the first film stands at around 10 to 12, but this number doesn't account for the implied victims of Candyman's long history of violence in Cabrini Green. Throughout the film, there are references to numerous unsolved murders and disappearances attributed to Candyman, suggesting his actual victim count could be much higher. Moving on to Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh, 1995, we see Candyman's influence spread to New Orleans, where his tragic backstory is further explored. In this film, Candyman's victims include Ethan Tarrant, father of the protagonist Annie, killed years before the main events of the film. During the course of the movie, Candyman claims several more lives, including Annie's husband Paul, her colleague Honore Thabida, and Matthew Ellis, a young boy from Annie's class. One of the most brutal scenes in this sequel involves the murder of Octavia, Annie's mother, who is found splayed out on the bathroom floor with Candyman's iconic hook wound. The film also implies several other deaths, including police officers and bystanders during Candyman's rampage. The confirmed kill count for Farewell to the Flesh is around 6 to 8, but again, this number likely understates the true extent of Candyman's violence. The film suggests that Candyman has been active in New Orleans for generations, hinting at a much higher number of victims over the years. In Candyman, Day of the Dead, 1999, the action moves to Los Angeles, where Candyman continues his reign of terror. This film sees a significant increase in on-screen deaths. Candyman's victims include Caroline's boyfriend David, her friend Tamara, and a number of police officers and bystanders. One particularly gruesome scene involves the murder of an entire art gallery full of people, with the body count for this single incident likely in the double digits. The film also introduces the concept of Candyman creating followers who carry out murders in his name, blurring the line between direct kills and deaths caused by his influence. This includes the actions of the corrupt Detective Kraft, who murders several people while under Candyman's sway. For Day of the Dead, the confirmed kill count is approximately 15 to 20, making it the bloodiest entry in the original trilogy. However, as with the previous films, there are hints of a much larger number of off-screen victims attributed to Candyman's long-standing presence in the area. The 2021 Candyman film, directed by Nia Da Costa, serves as a direct sequel to the 1992 original, ignoring the events of the previous two sequels. This film takes a different approach to Candyman, presenting him not as a single entity but as a collective vengeful spirit born from racist violence. While this complicates the body count attribution, we can still analyze the deaths associated with the Candyman legend in this film. The movie opens with a flashback to the 1970s, where we see the death of Sherman Fields, wrongly accused of putting razor blades in candy. While not killed by the original Candyman, Sherman's death adds to the collective trauma that fuels the Candyman legend. Throughout the film, several characters fall victim to Candyman or are compelled to violence by his influence. This includes the deaths of art critics Clive Criveler and Finley Stevens, gallery owner Jerrica Cooper and her assistant, and several teenagers in a girls' bathroom at a high school. The film culminates in a confrontation at Cabrini Green, where multiple police officers are killed. The direct body count for the 2021 film is around 10 to 12, but the movie strongly implies that many more deaths have occurred and will continue to occur as the legend spreads. The film's ending, which sees Anthony McCoy transformed into a new incarnation of Candyman, suggests that the cycle of violence will continue, potentially leading to many more deaths in the future. When we tally the on-screen and directly implied deaths across all four Candyman films, we arrive at a total of approximately 41 to 52 confirmed victims. However, this number grossly understates the true impact of Candyman's reign of terror. To understand the full extent of Candyman's body count, we need to consider several factors that extend beyond what we see on screen. 1. Historical victims. Candyman's origin dates back to the late 19th century, and it's implied that he has been active since his creation. Over more than a century, the number of victims could potentially be in the hundreds. 2. Implied off-screen deaths. Throughout the franchise, there are numerous references to unsolved murders and disappearances attributed to Candyman. These implied victims could significantly increase the body count. 3. Deaths by proxy. Candyman often influences others to commit murder in his name. While not direct kills, these deaths are a result of his malevolent influence and could be considered part of his overall body count. 4. Generational impact. The Candyman's legacy of violence creates a cycle of trauma that leads to more death and suffering. While not all of these deaths may be supernatural in nature, they are a direct result of the fear and violence Candyman has sown in communities. 5. Collective trauma. The 2021 film presents Candyman as a manifestation of collective racial trauma. In this interpretation, every black person unjustly killed due to systemic racism could be seen as part of Candyman's extended body count, potentially numbering in the thousands. When we factor in these considerations, Candyman's true body count could easily surpass 500 or even approach 1,000 over the course of his long and bloody existence. This number becomes even more staggering when we consider the ripple effects of his actions on communities and generations. It's also worth noting the psychological impact of Candyman's kills. Unlike many other horror villains, Candyman's victims often summon him willingly, if skeptically. His method of appearing when his name is called 5 times in front of a mirror turns an innocent game or act of disbelief into a deadly encounter. This psychological element extends the impact of his violence beyond the immediate victims to terrorize entire communities, leaving lasting scars on survivors and witnesses. Candyman's modus operandi is also unique in the pantheon of horror villains. His victims often die by his iconic hook, but he's also shown the ability to command swarms of bees, manipulate his victims' perceptions, and even possess or influence others to commit violence on his behalf. This versatility in his methods of killing adds an extra layer of terror to his actions. The Candyman's influence extends beyond the fictional world into real-life discussions about racial injustice and generational trauma. While not counted in his official body count, the Candyman films have sparked important conversations about the lasting impact of racist violence and the way societies grapple with their dark histories. In this sense, Candyman's victims could be said to include those whose worldviews have been challenged or changed by engaging with his story. As the franchise continues to evolve, with potential for more sequels or spin-offs in the future, it's likely that Candyman's body count will only continue to grow. Each new installment provides opportunities for the vengeful spirit to add to his talent, ensuring that his reign of terror is far from over. In conclusion, while the exact number may be impossible to determine precisely, Candyman's body count is undoubtedly one of the most impactful in horror movie history. From his tragic origin as Daniel Robitaille to his current status as a collective manifestation of racial trauma, Candyman has left a trail of bodies and broken lives in his wake that few other horror villains can match. His influence extends beyond simple numbers, touching on deep-seated societal fears and injustices. As audiences continue to be drawn to his unique blend of supernatural horror and social commentary, one thing is certain: Candyman's impact, both in terms of lives taken and minds challenged, is likely to persist for years to come.